Hello, this is Dread from Last Epic Builds, and today's video topic is going to be a video about my budget tank Werebear. Yes, I finally got around to playing a Werebear build after an entire year of playing. I have finally played my first Werebear build. Well, due to the changes of this patch, this hotfix actually, changing it so that endurance scales with your max HP instead of scaling as a flat number per level, it makes a lot of build variety possible, and this is one of the builds that has become possible because of that. Now, the biggest change is in the upper right of the Druid tree, there is a node called Hide Skin that gives you 150 flat health for 10 points and also makes it so 10% of your 10% of your max HP is given to you as endurance threshold. What does that mean? Well, if you are at, like, for instance, 3k HP and you were in the old system, you'd be about like 600 endurance threshold at 3k HP because of 20% of your max HP is endurance threshold. But now as a druid, as a master druid, you can get to 900 endurance threshold, and that is actually more endurance threshold than most builds. It beats Sentinel, it beats Mage, it beats all these other classes that could almost get that much endurance threshold, but just for 3k HP, which Werebear can push way farther than 3k HP. I'm level 80 with 3k HP and like barely any gear, as I wanted to keep the gear budget so that people had easier expectations on, what to make the build for. I don't want it to be cheap so that people have fun with it instead of, have to go for lofty, expensive goals. This build is just super cheap. Now, the build isn't easy to start. It is cheap, but it isn't easy to start. What do I mean by that? Well, the build doesn't really start popping off until you start dual wielding with double Raider Axe. And then eventually you move on to a two-hander with a Titan Heart, because a Titan's Heart gives you 15% DR when you're holding a two-hander, and it also gives you 40% increased HP. It gives you the same amount of HP that a rare chest would give you, while also giving you 40% increased melee damage and also giving you 15% additional DR. And this DR, damage reduction, multiplies with all of your other damage reduction, making you a very tanky boy. I've already pushed to 212 with almost no gear on this build. After like level 80, it's like really tanky. I've face tanked every single boss all the way up to empowered bosses. I've face tanked Herod a few times as well. Empowered Herod. I've been trying to farm the empowered Viz Shred Blessing, but no avail. I have not gotten it. But other than that, the build has been amazing so far. It's been really fun. One caveat with the build though is, so this is not 100% uptime, because 100% uptime isn't really achievable anymore in this patch because of the way that the mana efficiency node works. So the issue is the 300% mana efficiency node. It makes it so that when you reach 30% of your HP, it turns it to, you go into human form for that 300% mana efficiency, which is directly anti-synergistic with the new endurance system. And that is very bad, because you're not taking advantage of your berserker, you're not taking advantage of your endurance, you're not taking advantage of your gigantic life pool at that point. You might as well say goodbye to 30% of your HP. Why do I say that? Well, when you're out of Werebear form, you're pretty much, dead, pretty much. Unless if you run away and spam a Terra's Blessing, which I set up in the build so that if you do get kicked out, you at least have a backup plan. But not being able to utilize your gigantic amounts of damage reduction at 30% HP, this is one of those builds that has a large chunk of HP as kind of like a like a flat modifier, and then of course the DR on 30% less HP with endurance threshold is so absolutely disgusting. It gives you so much effective HP that you'll be going from 900 HP to 3k to 900 to 3k to 900 and 3k, and that's just normal for the build. Now, if you're playing the mana efficiency version with Roar and the 100% uptime, you will eventually just die, because it doesn't matter how tanky you are. As soon as you get to the spot where you would be tanky, you instantly get kicked out of Werebear form, and then you're kind of a sitting duck. So this build is made with that anti-synergy in mind, so it is not 100% uptime. You will have to eventually leave form. As you're wailing on things, you will not lose mana, but sometimes you'll accidentally hold down the button for too long, accidentally do an extra auto attack. Sometimes you won't have all the correct buffs up, and sometimes you'll miss with your swipe. So eventually you will have to leave, but I've noticed I could go like 4 to 5 monoliths without having to reset. I could go like 2 arena waves without having to reset. So it's not really annoying. It's just more of a thing you need to remember. Like, for instance, what I usually do, I usually leave out of Werebear form right after I kill the boss of a monolith, like right after, collect the loot, then leave. And then by the time I enter the next monolith, Werebear form is back up. So it is in theory 100% uptime. And in arena, if you want to push arena with this build, which is what this build is meant for, is pushing arena. I just don't really have time to push it in arena right now, as I have a lot of other builds to do, and I have some preparations to do as well for the 1000 sub anniversary. But the biggest issue, like I said, is just the fact that you will sometimes have to hop out of form. And if you hop out of form in combat, I do have a Terra's Blessing set up so that you can spam it on yourself to heal yourself out of any danger, so that you don't end up dying. You just kind of, kite until you can put your Werebear back up. It's not as bad thanks to Terra's Blessing. With that being said, let's get into the skills, shall we? All right, here we are in game. We have Yogi the Cringe Bear here. If you don't get the reference, it's all right. We're barely res capped, by the way. It's kind of funny. So for skills here, we have Swipe. So we take 2 points into Way of the Hunt, 4 points into Wingarian Reach for the AoE, then 1 point Travel into Culling. This is actually kind of useful during boss fights. 7% Cull is pretty strong. But obviously you're not really trying to get to this. You're trying to get to this. Trapper. Swipe hits deal more damage against slowed enemies, so we deal more damage, because you want to be actually dealing damage. You don't want to be ZDBS. You take 2 points into Aspect of the Panther for travel, 1 point into Feline Hunter, 3 points into Ambush, and then 4 points into Apex Predator. While I am in Werebear form here, you can see my crit multi. My attack with Swipe, I'm at 369 crit multi, so that's why we grabbed this node. Now, if you have over 300% crit multi without this node, I would heavily suggest dropping this, dropping the crit, dropping the Feline Hunter. I'm probably dropping the Feline Hunter to put 2 points into Rending and then 6 points into the Way of the Hunt, so that you can put Endurance Threshold on your Empowered Hero instead of the Fizz Red. That would be the best overall. But as of right now, for the budget version, this would be where you would go, especially if you're dual wielding early on at like level 55 to try to get to max crit. Now for Thorn Totem's literally just here, so to proc our spell damage if we have a totem, and later on to proc our Totemic Fury for attack speed. So we just want as many totems as possible to get, obviously, so that we have as many totems as possible, because we only need to require to have 1 out. So if you have like 5 totems out, that means the enemy has to kill all 5 of them before you lose your buffs. Just go for HP, go for some armor shred. You could go for chill instead. It doesn't really matter what you go for this. This is kind of like negligent, other than what's up here, like negligible. Now for Werebear form, we take 4 points into Earthsign Heart, 1 point into Wizened Claws, so our increased spell damage is increased melee damage, very strong, one of the main reasons why Werebear is so strong. 1 point into Star Claw, same reason. Spell damage is increased critical strike chance, so while we are in Werebear form, you can see that we have a lot of spell damage. Let me summon a totem here. Just 1 second, I'm waiting to summon a totem. I don't know if it will or not. There you go. I'm at 465 crit here. I mean 400% spell damage. This is also this doesn't include global damage modifiers like generic damage increases, sadly, which is like fine, but it's about like 300% spell damage, so 300% crit, which is very strong, allows you to go full crit. 4 points into Rip and Tear for the crit chance and the damage. 1 point into Enervating Blow makes it so that we can sustain Werebear form for a long time without having to restart. 3 points into Hightail for cooldown recovery speed, as we want to be charging and be as mobile as possible. Puts it 2 seconds. Also makes farming Monolith very, very, very fun, as you can just charge through the entire Monolith and completely ignore it. 3 points into Pummel for the melee physical damage. Flat. 1 point into Bash for travel, then 2 points into Skull Crush. So this build will stun a lot in general, especially if you go for a little bit of shock chance on your suffix. But pretty much this is pretty much just like extra damage every so often. Don't really rely on it, but we don't have other points to put into. So the other versions of Werebear builds, they usually go into Roar, into Invigoration, and Woodland Bear, so that they can proc Entangling Roots to sustain Werebear form. But the issue is it's all dedicated towards this node called Earthsign Wisdom. Now, the biggest issue with this node is you revert to human form at 30% life, while your endurance threshold will get at 30% of your life. So it kind of causes a lot of issues. The introduction of this node, Hideskin in Druid, has effectively killed this node for competitive Werebear builds, because it's either you go Endurance or you go this node, and Endurance is pretty freaking strong. So yeah, I don't know, like you can go this node still if you go like the minion version. Like you can go Wolves with Werebear now with Grizz and Earthsign Harmony. That could be a build. So there's still uses for it. It's just not as easy to do anymore, because you don't want to remove your endurance, and it also is anti-synergy as well with Berserker as well. That's another reason. And then we have Vatera's Blessing. This is 100% meant to just keep you alive when you're not in Werebear form. Let's go for as much healing as possible. Summon healing totems for more healing. Boon of the Shifter for even more healing right after you get knocked out. 5 points into mana efficiency, so that when you go back into Werebear form, you have mana still. 1 point into Purge to cleanse ailments, so you're not chilled while you're out of Werebear form. 1 point into Vatera's Blessing, heals over time, very strong. Then 1 point into Effervescence, so it heals you again, which is very strong. Now, Ice Thorns. Ice Thorns just triggered when hit. 3 points into Dagger Thorns, 2 points into Bramble Armor, 4 points into Spell Thorns, so that we have about a 40% chance of it proccing when we get hit. And we're not building dodge, so that's every single hit. 1 point into Anophilia, 1 point into Thorn Shield, 5 points into Bark Shield, 3 points into Eternal Protection, so that our Ice Thorns last longer. Then 1 point into the recast chance. You could put this anywhere, but that was like the last point, and why not, right? And that's pretty much it for the skills today. All right, now we're going to talk about passives and mastery. So we take 6 points into Gift of the Wilderness, 1 point travel into Natural Attunement, 5 points into Hunter's Restoration for the increased health, 6 points into Wisdom of the Wild. Increased spell damage is an S tier stat for us because it gives us crit and melee damage because it converts. 1 point travel into Ancient Call, 5 points into Berserker later on. I'm just getting to it. Then for Beastmaster, we take 8 points into Earthsign Strength for more DR and increased damage, 2 points travel into Ambush and savagery, so that we get aspect to the shark every 5 seconds. We get a buff that gives us increased melee attack speed for 3 seconds, which is pretty strong. 4 points into Boar Heart, so that we get aspect to the boar. 1 point into Call of the Pack. You'll be filling this out later when you have more points. 5 points into Porcine Constitution, so we have more aspect to the boar, and then 3 points into Primal Strength, so we have a good enough uptime with aspect of the boar. Now, then as well, we take 5 points into Blood Claw for Leech and Penetration. 7 points into Bark Skin for endurance percentage, so we almost get up to max endurance percentage. 8 points into Spirit Claws for 16 melee flat while we're in Werebear form, very strong node. 10 points into Blossoming Vines for more HP. 10 points into Hide Skin, this is like the most important node in the build, makes us super duper tanky. And then 6 points into Ursine Maw. If you're having troubles with crit, you can put in more nodes into this, and then that's pretty much it here. You don't need the increased crit here, you don't need the armor, you don't need any of this. And then to use the rest of the points, I would suggest going for Call of the Pack, and then building up into Totemic Fury after grabbing some penetration here, 1 point travel here, and then Totemic Fury here. If you need a full build, planner, there will be a full build planner in the description below, so that you can use that to try to work towards. I'm ending the build a little bit early, as there's a lot of other builds on my mind that I want to try out, and this is just one on the way. So let's get to the gearing, shall we? All right, for gearing, for idols, there's a few idols you could use. You can have you need a chance to summon Thorn Totem on hit. You need at least one of these. And then for the suffix, you want like increased spell damage if you have a totem. 4 of these would work perfectly. But you can also go for 4 of these as well. These would work as well. Although, like I said, you at least need 1 chance to summon Thorn. So like 3 of these. Either of these work. They're both are just as strong. I like this one a little bit better, because it just gives you just flat damage even if you don't have a totem out. You also can get increased spell damage while transformed, which is very strong. It's a very strong one. Increased spell damage while transformed, and then increased spell damage if you have an active totem. That would probably be the best in slot for idols, and that's pretty much it for idols. Then for our helmet, we want crit multi while transformed. We want vitality there instead of summon Spriggan. I just had a shitty helmet. Then we have increased health and endurance. For our amulet, we want crit multi. For the other prefix, we want Fizz Pen, and then we want a res and then HP. For our weapon, we want attack speed, melee fizz, slow, and shock. Why do we want shock? Well, because shock increases the chance an enemy gets stunned by 5% each shock. So it allows us to proc this node more often, Skull Crush, so that our hits deal 100% more damage against stunned enemies, which gives us a lot of burst potential. And then Chance Assault and Hit is obviously for the node Inside Swipe, that gives us 60% more damage on enemies that are slowed. For the chest, we're running a Titan Heart. You can run a rare until you run a Titan Heart. More info on the budget version after this. But so 15% less DR, 50% less damage taken, insane. 40% increased damage, insane. 40% increased health, insane. We don't care about the less health regen because we leech so much health, it doesn't matter since we're Werebear. Like I said, a combination of these two makes you really tanky, and this multiplies all your other DR. The 40% increased health is a lot of HP, as you can tell. Then, of course, for our rings, we want 2 gold rings for elemental res, physical damage, spell damage on the prefixes, health and res, health and endurance, spell damage and fizz damage, same thing. For the belt, we just want fizz damage, health and health. Gloves, we want the Crusader gauntlets for the void res, crit chance, melee attack speed, void res, and then like hybrid HP here. Boots, this is like literally the best in slot boots. This is exactly what you want for boots. I just got a little unlucky with it on the rolls, but we almost got to like tier 20 here with this fucker. Now, Spirit Catcher. This is pretty much what you want. You just want some HP on the last thing, and then your res captain ready to go once you're all set up. I am a little bit under. That's because I needed to shape these things, but I actually ran out of runes of shaping, so I was not able to shape these. So I am actually not at capped res, but if you shaped these things and then put some extra res and finish the res, you should be completely fine with gearing overall. And just shove as much HP as humanly possible wherever you can, and you should be able to reach 4k HP at level 100, which will give you a lot of endurance threshold as well, and should make this very tanky for arena. All right, and that's it for the gearing. All right, and the part of the video where we talk about how to build this build on a budget. So the main difference between the Titan Heart version with the two-hander and this version is, instead of not skill panels, I'm sorry, passives, instead of Ancient Call, we go for Harmony of Blades so that we can dual wield. We will take a little bit more damage, but we'll be doing more damage thanks to the fact we're running double Raider Axe. With 15% base crit thanks to double Raider Axe, it will be 10 times easier to reach the 100% crit mark, so you will be able to sustain Werebear form much faster. And this is how you pretty much level from level 55 onward. You do need to get to level 55 first, so level however else you can with Swipe or Surf and Strike or whatever. But once you hit 55 and you can wear double Raider Axe, it's all a breeze after that. And then once you get the Titan Heart and the two-hander set up, then you can swap to that and go full tank. Or you could just stay with this version. This version will do just as fine. You have just as much HP. You will take a little bit more damage, but you have more movement speed and you deal a lot more damage. So, and I'll have a lot more attack speed. All right. And with that being said, that's the end of the video. Thank you all for watching and have a wonderful rest of your evening wherever you're at, and bye.